We have to begin the show today with the big booty bill that just advanced through the United States Senate and is being sent back to the House of Representatives, where the House will vote on it again before sending it potentially to President Trump's desk to sign. This bill passed with a 51-50 margin, with J.D. Vance, the bald baby himself, the evil Care Bear, being the tie-breaking vote. There were 3 Republican senators, I believe, who did not vote for it. There are even 2 Republican senators who are retiring because of how horrible this bill is. I am not exaggerating when I say this. This is potentially the worst piece of legislation in the history of the United States of America when it comes to blatantly fucking over the 99% of people who live in this country. Quite literally, the only motherfuckers who benefit from Donald Trump's big booty bill is the 1%, are the wealthiest motherfuckers in the country. There is no working class person who will not be impacted by this bill. The scope of how horrific and disastrous that this legislation is it's so wide. It is immense. Before we get into the news coverage, it is estimated that 51,000 people are going to fucking die as a result of this bill's passage. The majority, I would probably estimate that nearly all of it is coming from the reductions or the cuts of Medicaid and SNAP, which totals $1.1 trillion. It might actually be a little less than that. They managed to cut the spending in this bill, I think, but I'm guessing it's, I'm guessing it's still around that $1.1 trillion mark. That, of course, leads to people not getting the care that they need, people who are disabled, people who are chronically ill, people who live in rural areas, because guess what? There are going to be hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of rural hospital closures that coincide with this reduction in Medicare. We have coverage of this. We have various pieces of coverage from this. The first, courtesy of ABC News. Let's go ahead.
Now to the drama and all-nighter on Capitol Hill. The Senate narrowly advancing President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. But much more work is ahead to get the tax cut and spending bill across the finish line. And one Republican senator is feeling the pressure after opposing the legislation. Here's ABC's Jay O'Brien back on Capitol Hill tonight.
Tonight, on the eve of a marathon series of votes on President Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill, a stunning twist. One of the bill's most outspoken GOP opponents drawing Trump's ire and announcing he will not run for re-election. Senator Thom Tillis, one of 2 Republicans who voted against advancing Trump's signature bill last night, writing his decision not to seek a...
Oh, that's right. Ron Johnson flipped because he's a fucking pussy. I forgot. It was Thom Tillis and Rand Paul.
Third term is not a hard choice. Just hours earlier, Trump blasting the GOP senator for his opposition to the legislation in a lengthy social media post, threatening to support primary challengers against him and saying he made a big mistake for America. Tillis concerned over the bill's proposed cuts to Medicaid, now warning that lawmakers who embrace bipartisanship and independence are, quote, becoming an endangered species. Following a standstill on the Senate floor.
He's 1 billion % correct. Although that is not exclusive, but significantly more prominent in the Republican Party, where you are either a Trump dick rider or not. And if you are not a Trump dick rider, you draw the ire of Donald Trump. But since so many of these Republicans are unprincipled little fucking pussies, they're going to do whatever their grand wizard says that they're going to do.
Trump's mega bill finally inching forward, clearing a key procedural hurdle just before midnight after one GOP opponent, Senator Ron Johnson, flipped from no to yes.
3211 of the National Nuclear Security Administration Act
Democrats lacking the numbers to block Trump's agenda, delaying the final vote in the Senate by forcing a reading of the entire roughly 1,000-page bill all night long. It took more than 15 hours. Once adamant he wants the bill passed by July 4th, Trump now acknowledging that may not be possible.
I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you that if we're 2 days late or 5 days late, everybody says, oh, he had a tremendous failure. Whatever it is, as long as we have it, it's very important.
The centerpiece of the president's legislative agenda, the bill includes roughly $4 trillion in tax cuts and fulfills some key campaign promises.
$4 trillion in tax cuts for who? ABC News. For who? It's not for lower income earners. It's not for middle income earners. It is for high income earners only. For the 1% only. There is a $1.1 trillion wealth transfer happening in this legislation where lower and middle income earners will foot the bill for this spending and wind up either not having access to social services or wind up paying more for these goods and services that are, of course, owned by the 1%.
Like no taxes on tips and overtime.
That's bullshit as well,
trying to cover the cost with cuts to programs like Medicaid, leading to an estimated 11.8 million Americans potentially losing their health coverage over the next decade. And by slashing Biden-era clean energy incentives like solar panel tax credits, vital to small businesses like Micah Gold Markell's in Philadelphia. Some of his employees voted for Trump, he says.
And I'm concerned that we would have to have the size of our company.
We're talking about 30 jobs.
We're talking about 30 jobs. That's right. I mean, it hurts to say that.
Billionaire Elon Musk, meanwhile, once again bashing the bill, concerned about nonpartisan estimates that it would add more than $3 trillion to the national debt, and calling cuts to wind and solar initiatives, quote, utterly insane and destructive.
Jay O'Brien joins us now from the Capitol. Jay, we're hearing late word from President Trump tonight with a new warning for any more Republicans who would oppose this bill. What's he saying?
Yeah, Lindsay, after that surprise announcement from Tillis, President Trump delivering a message to any hardline Republicans who might oppose the spending in this bill, warning, remember, quote, you still have to get reelected. Don't go too crazy. Senate Majority Leader John Thune can only afford to lose 3 Republicans on that final vote, expected to drag well into tomorrow. And if it gets out of the Senate, this bill will have to go back to the House, where the original version only passed by a single vote. Lindsay.
Jay, thank you.
It is now on its way to the House of Representatives, which is going to be interesting because there were a handful of Republican representatives who later said that they actually regret voting for this bill, which is really fucking rich because you could have just voted no on it. Marjorie Taylor Greene sticks out to me because she's like, if I had actually read the bill, I would not have voted for it. I did not realize that as a public servant, as someone who is in public policy, I was unaware that I actually had to read through this legislation. I thought that I could just show up to the House of Representatives, collect a taxpayer-funded paycheck, say that President Trump is the greatest president ever, and that would be the extent of my responsibilities. Like, how fucking stupid do these people have to be to not recognize that that is literally their fucking job? In the aftermath of this, there have been a bunch of liberal and progressive commentators talking about, like, the specifics of this bill, regardless of what they are, the things that they're taking away, the things that they're adding in. We have this tweet from Mikkel Jolet, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, I'm sorry, that says, I don't think we're talking enough about how this big, dumb, ugly bill expands ICE by a factor of 20, increasing their budget to $45 billion from their current budget of $2.2 billion. That's 20 times more agents, 20 times arrests, plus illegal detention. Senators, Trump is using this bill to create his own paramilitary Gestapo. He follows this up If you think ICE will stop at targeting undocumented people and not become a force to suppress political dissident, you are high as fuck. And he is correct. ICE, as it stands right now, does not have the manpower nor the resources to conduct Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda to the scale at which he wants it, The only way that they can do that is if they beef up the agency. And $45 billion, in all likelihood, is enough for them to do that. This second tweet in the thread is particularly noteworthy because this is something that I have been saying for the last couple of months, is that it begins with undocumented immigrants. It begins with the Trump administration stripping them of their civil liberties and their constitutionally guaranteed rights before moving on to people who criticize him and, at least in his eyes, more importantly, people who criticize Israel. Civil liberties do not fucking matter to a fascist authoritarian government. The faster that they are able to get rid of citizenship designations, the faster that nobody is a citizen and nobody has any protections. This is where the majority of the funding increases occur. It is with ICE, it is with the military budget, it is potentially with the Iron Dome as well. There is nothing going to any sort of service that would benefit a working class individual. And obviously, these funds that are going to the military, they're not going to the fucking VA, you dipshit. They're going to Peter Thiel, and they're going to Boeing, and they're going to Raytheon for them to build the surveillance military state that we're going to be living in 4 fucking years. This next tweet I have courtesy of Jon Favreau, one of the Pod Save boys. Shocking how bad this bill is. 17 million people are going to lose healthcare. This is with people just being kicked off Medicaid. This is with people being subject to Medicaid work requirements, which obviously don't work. There are various instances in various states where they've tried these work requirements and nothing really happens. No one's really affected because most people that are on Medicaid that are able to work. And the reason they're on Medicaid is because they don't qualify for private health insurance at their job, or they're not offered private health insurance at their job. This includes the closure of rural hospitals, people who will not have access to medical services. This includes people who are going to have lapses in coverage due to paperwork and technical errors because Medicaid, there is also a back end to that. There is a Medicaid portal. There are Medicaid portals for all 50 states and Washington, D.C. If there is no infrastructure for that, how are they going to be able to support people logging into this portal? 30% higher electricity cost, millions of manufacturing and construction jobs destroyed. I believe these two play into the reduction of green energy. I know there are some states that are more ahead on green energy initiatives. I know my home state of New York is one of the leaders when it comes to, I think, hydroelectric power and nuclear power, solar power, wind power as well. All of those initiatives are gone. That also means that there are not going to be any plants being built in places like the Rust Belt and in Appalachia, and people who have had their lives destroyed by the outsourcing of these natural resource plants. Biggest ever cut in food assistance for families, kids, veterans, $4 trillion in deficits, $1 trillion in tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. People should be on the phones in the streets telling everyone who will listen. I wish that Jon Favreau included the numbers to these cuts. $1.1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and SNAP. 800 billion to Medicaid from Medicaid, and then an extra 200 to 250 billion from SNAP. People are going to fucking die from this. 51,000 people, it is estimated, are going to pass away because of this legislation. Look at this fucking first dipshit. Grok, are these accurate statements? And then Grok says these claims are mostly accurate. Like, dude, what the fuck, man? We are so cooked. NBC News compiled this nice little article for us titled "Who Wins and Who Loses in the Republicans' Big Beautiful Bill They're saying that this is the worst bill of all time. I disagree. This bill is actually tremendous because it is taking all of the money from those filthy little poor people. It is pulling the dollar bills out of their grubby little fingers and transferring it right into the underpants of my financiers. I'm talking about Jeffrey Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. I used to call him Mark Zuckerberg, but not anymore because he doesn't suck. He no longer sucks. Winner, corporations. Surprise, surprise. This legislation would make permanent trillions of dollars in corporate tax cuts enacted in 2017 during Trump's first term and expand other tax breaks for businesses. That includes permanently lowering the corporate tax rate to 21% from the 35% level before the 2017 tax cuts. This bill would also extend or increase other tax breaks for business investments like those on new machinery, equipment, and research and development, which business groups have said would encourage business investment in the U.S. Wrong. They're fucking liars. That's not true. It's going to encourage investment into the pockets of the fucking C-suite and the shareholders. Like, the capitalist propaganda is so fucking strong that working class people think that businesses investing in business means that they're actually doing R&D. That is antithetical to running a fucking business because it costs money to conduct research and development, and it costs money to take risks on innovation. Corporations are not trying to innovate because it is too risky, and they operate on a quarter-by-quarter basis and not on a multi-year basis. We see this with fucking stock buybacks all the time. Like, these business owners, all they care about is enriching themselves. All they care about is being able to buy another goddamn private jet as your lights get shut off and you can't heat your fucking house in the winter. The bill would also extend through 2033 tax incentives enacted in 2017 for businesses that invest in disadvantaged areas called opportunity zones. Losers, younger generations. The most evergreen subheading I've ever fucking seen in my life. These cuts would add around $3 trillion over the next decade to the national debt, according to the analysis by the Congressional Budget Office. I have to clarify something because I've been very loosey-goosey with talking about the debt. I've said on various occasions that I don't give a fuck about the national debt. And while that is true, I've never explained the conditions behind that statement. I don't give a fuck about the national debt so long as there is sufficient revenue generation. I've highlighted how the national debt is calculated, how the national debt is split into two separate forms of debt. And as long as there is revenue coming into the government, the rising debt is not really that big of an issue. Why this is an issue is because you cannot increase spending while cutting taxes. That is not how monetary policy should function. You should look to increase spending through higher taxation of the 1% and corporations. You use that additional revenue to fund the expansion of these social services. I don't give a fuck if you're looking to expand Medicaid using funds that you ripped away from the greasy, slimy fingers of Jeff Bezos. I give a fuck about this because you are not raising taxes on anybody. In fact, there's going to be less revenue coming into the government. And you are also taking away social services that working class people rely on. So that way Jeff Bezos can have another fucking wedding that none of his friends go to because he has no fucking friends. Because he's a fucking weird billionaire. That means the U.S. would have to borrow more money to cover its expenses, requiring it to pay an estimated $600 to $700 billion in additional interest payments, according to an analysis by the Center for Responsible Fiscal Budget. The amount of money Americans pay toward interest on the country's debt is expected to increase sharply in the coming years, totaling $78 trillion over the next 30 years and accounting for 34% of federal revenues. Paying for that added interest will fall to future generations, likely in the form of higher taxes and less spending on other programs younger generations could benefit from, like early childhood education, more affordable housing, or improved infrastructure. It will also give the U.S. less flexibility to throw if there is a future crisis, such as pandemic or a war. This is exactly what I'm saying. There is no additional revenue being generated. and there will not be sizable revenue being generated because you cannot fucking tax middle and lower income earners any more than they're already being taxed. There is not enough money in their fucking paycheck to make up the gap. As U.S. debt has ballooned, all of which has occurred under Republican administrations, by the way, with the current ratio of debt to GDP at similar levels to those seen during World War II, it has also increased concern among investors about the country's ability to make its debt and interest payments on time. That means investors are starting to seek a higher interest payments or yield in exchange for buying U.S. debt, which could also drive up interest rates for other private loans with higher mortgage rates or interest on a small business loan. What isn't mentioned here is also the likelihood that the U.S. dollar will no longer be the world's reserve currency. The reason why the safety net that presents is there's always demand for the U.S. dollar. When the U.S. dollar inevitably falls to the Chinese yuan, that safety net is not going to exist. Winners, high-income households. Shocker. The bill would greatly expand the amount of SALT taxes, the amount that SALT tax households are able to deduct from their federal taxes from the current gap of $10,000 up to $40,000. This, you can only do SALT taxes if you itemize shit on your taxes, which again is something that only wealthier individuals are taking advantage of. The biggest beneficiary from that change would be households making between $200,000 and $500,000 a year and those that own property, because they are likelier to pay higher property and income taxes, according to an analysis by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. It would also disproportionately benefit households in higher tax states like New York, New Jersey, and California. Wealthy households and business owners would also benefit from a permanent reduction in the estate tax. Under the legislation, heirs of estates valued at less than $15 million would not have to pay a tax on their inheritance. That cap is set to drop to $7 million in 2026. Do you see how fucking ridiculous people sound when they advocate against taxing these motherfuckers? $7 million, and you don't want these motherfuckers to be taxed so that way we can use that money to fund social services? Well, in a functioning country, that is what would happen, because obviously we know the estate tax, it's given directly to Israel. It is used to bomb Palestinian children. But like, this is not a small sum of money. They don't need all of this money, obviously. Losers, low-income households. Provisions in the latest version of the bill would cause nearly 12 million low-income people to lose their health care over the next decade by cutting around $1 trillion from Medicaid, the health insurance program for poor and disabled people, according to the CBO. The Senate bill includes steeper cuts to Medicaid than an earlier version passed by the House. Wow. I apologize for not recognizing that sooner. So now it's, most likely going to be maybe closer to like $1.5 trillion when you account for Medicaid and when you also account for SNAP. The cuts would take a particular toll on people in rural areas who are more likely to receive their health insurance through Medicaid than those in urban or suburban areas. Researchers at Georgetown University found that 40% of children in small and rural towns receive their health insurance from Medicaid. The bill could also reduce the number of people who receive their insurance through the ACA. The version of the Senate bill released over the weekend also includes cuts to SNAP, also known as food stamps, by requiring adults ages 18 to 64 without disabilities to work at least 80 hours a month unless they are caring for children under 10. The added requirements could lead to $300 billion in cuts to food stamp spending, according to the CBO. This is a massive misconception. This is incredibly long withstanding propaganda from the Reagan administration that people who receive assistance through the government are lazy and don't work, when that is simply not the case. The reason that they are seeking assistance from the government is that their fucking job does not provide them with the appropriate means to fucking feed themselves and their family. This will disproportionately affect people who vote Republican. This is going to lead to a fucking disaster for the Republican Party come the midterms in 2026. We will get to a video from CNN about just how strikingly and remarkably unpopular this legislation is. It is astounding. It is astounding. I'm not gonna spoil. We're not gonna spoil too much. We're gonna finish up with this. Winners: workers with income from tips and overtime. The legislation would carry through on a campaign promise by Trump to exempt income from tips and overtime from federal income taxes. Tipped workers make up about 2.5% of the workforce, and about 12% of hourly workers clock some overtime each year, according to analysis by the Yale Budget Lab. Both tax exemptions are structured as deductions that workers would claim when they filed their taxes the following year. The tax exemption would only apply to federal income tax, so workers would still have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes on their income, along with state and local taxes. As many as 40% of tipped workers already don't make enough money to have to pay federal income tax on their earning, so the benefit would be relatively limited. I believe the cap on the deductions for this is at $26,000. This whole no tax on tips bullshit is just a talking point, and it's a really fucking flimsy talking point as well, because it's very clear that none of these people who advocate for no tax on tips have ever worked in a job where they survive off of tips. Not taxing your tips will not lead to that much more money in your pocket. That is the reality of the matter. No taxes on overtime is also relatively limited. It will benefit people who work a ton of overtime, but there are a lot of people who work in a lot of jobs that don't get offered overtime, where 35, 40 hours comes around and they start getting their hours cut, or they start losing shifts. But recentering on no taxes on tips. It is not going to make or break someone financially. That is a false reality conjured up by the Republican Party. If Donald Trump actually wanted to greatly benefit tipped workers, he would abolish the sub-minimum wage and just make it a flat minimum wage. You have people who live you have servers in New Jersey who make $2.13 an hour. It would be infinitely more beneficial for them to make $15 an hour, or even like $14 an hour, because New York has a sub minimum wage. It's like $12. It's only $4 below the minimum wage. This does not fucking do anything. It's like a couple extra $1,000 a year, maybe, for these people, but ultimately they are still going to struggle to pay their fucking bills because they don't make enough money, and they have all of these extra expenditures that they have to worry about, whether that's healthcare, whether that's childcare. No taxes on tips does not, it shouldn't even be a fucking talking point. It's useless. It's nonsensical. There are infinitely better ways to materially benefit people who work for tips. Loser: healthcare workers. Less funding for Medicaid and fewer people with health insurance would mean a drop-off in doctors' visits, prescription refills, and medical procedures, and as a result, fewer workers needed to support those types of services. That could lead to the loss of nearly 500,000 healthcare jobs over the next decade, according to an analysis by George Washington University and the Commonwealth Fund. This is occurring in a country that consistently ranks last in healthcare performance and outcomes by the Commonwealth Fund. The United States, when compared to other OECD nations, other high-income nations, other highly industrialized nations like Canada, Australia, Japan, Korea, the Nordic countries, is consistently last. Whether it's 10, 11, 12 countries, doesn't fucking matter. The United States has horrific life expectancy compared to all of these countries. There is a bloated healthcare spending. There is twice as much spent per capita on healthcare in the United States than the next closest country. And we consistently have the worst healthcare outcomes. It is astounding. And that is of course the product of this dog shit health insurance system, where your healthcare you can receive it if you're able to pay $1,200 to get a fucking MRI, But instead, the hospitals and the insurance providers are just going to fucking extort you because you need this care. Like, you need this insulin. So we're going to charge you $100 a vial that's only going to last you 5 days. It's fucking disgusting. You have like 40,000 people that die every year because they don't have access to health insurance. You have 10% of the fucking country doesn't have health insurance because the government will simply not provide it to them. The Senate bill would also prohibit Medicare funding for entities that provide abortions, including Planned Parenthood, which could cause cutbacks or the closure of those healthcare centers. And Planned Parenthood does way more than just provide abortions. It provides preventative care in the form of cancer screenings, STI treatments, HIV, and also just other sorts of proactive reproductive healthcare treatments. This also does not include the mental healthcare toll that is going to occur from this. Mental healthcare is already not fucking non-existent in the United States, and this is only going to exacerbate it. You are only going to have more mentally unwell individuals as society literally collapses before our very eyes. The Senate legislation seeks to mitigate some of that pain for rural healthcare providers who care for a disproportionately high number of Medicaid patients with a $25 billion fund for rural hospitals. Winner, the fossil fuel companies. Both the House and Senate bill include wins for the fossil fuel industry, stripping away numerous provisions put in place during Joe Biden's administration to shift energy consumption away from fossil fuels. Both bills would delay a fee on excess methane pollution by oil and gas companies, roll back Biden-era rules to curb vehicle emissions, and include provisions intended to speed the development of new fossil fuel projects. Yeah, so we're just accelerating climate change. We are giving people cancer. We are looking to exterminate lower and middle income people as rapidly as possible. They are putting this shit on turbo mode, on 2x speed. The Senate bill also includes a new tax workaround for oil drillers that would enable them to avoid having to pay a corporate alternative minimum tax of 15%. Loser, clean energy companies and workers. This ties right in with us accelerating towards climate catastrophe. But we got to get to the public perception of this, because I can read an article, I can go on and on about why this shit is unpopular, but it really helps to see, so you can visualize how dog shit this shit is. And what better person to talk about than the Prince of Polls himself, the Prince of Polling,
CNN
Harry
chief data analyst
Enton.
Harry.
If you are a fucking numbers nerd, if you are into all this shit, you are eating good today, because Harry Enton came fucking prepared, boys and girls. This is courtesy of the Communist News Network, CNN, but it really highlights the distaste that the public has for this. And keep in mind that these poll numbers are occurring at a time when the majority of people don't know anything that's in this bill. There was a poll that we talked about recently from I think it was Kaiser Family Foundation poll, where they took all of these, they ran all these polls, they collected all this data for just people's responses to the question, and then people's responses to the question after being briefed on what was actually in the bill. And when people were made aware of its contents, the approval of it tanked considerably. But let's go ahead. Let's hear what Mr. Holy Toledo himself, Harry Enton, has to say about all of this.
Harry Enton here to run the numbers. All right, Harry, how do Americans feel about the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah, if we're talking about adjectives, how about they think it's awful, they think it's horrible, and to quote our colleague Charles Barkley, terrible, terrible, terrible. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look at the net favorable rating on the big, beautiful bill. I don't just got one poll for you, Omar. I got 5 of them, and the net favorable rating, minus 19 points, Washington Post, minus 20 points, Pew Research Center, Fox, minus 21, Quinnipiac University, minus 26, KFF, minus 29. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know that when the net favorable rating...
This Fox one stands out the most, not because, because it's the middle, but I know for a fact that the Fox News polls are as biased as possible. I just know that their methodology is fucking flawed. And I'm sure that, you know, they take an adequate sample size, but I just don't want to believe that. Even still, regardless, how do you as a public servant, especially someone who represents a Republican district or a Republican state, how do you see this shit? You see how deeply unpopular this is with your constituents. You comprehend how they are going to get fucked over. You are fully aware of it because you've read this 940-page piece of shit. And you're like, no, actually, I'm going to vote for this because maybe Donald Trump will be able to shake my fucking hand and I will never, ever have to watch it ever again. Like, this is astounding. This has to be like, put this shit in the rafters. Put this shit in the rafters. This is never before seen type shit that we're dealing with here.
Of your bill is somewhere between minus 19 and minus 29 points, that it is not a positive bill as viewed by the American public. The American public at this particular point hate the big, beautiful bill. As far as they're concerned, it's not a big, beautiful bill. It's a big, bad bill.
I always appreciate when you hold back, Harry.
I know,
look,
I try.
As people have learned more about the bill, I mean, obviously we're still in these stages working out individual pieces and we'll see where this ends up. But as people have learned about it, has that popularity changed at all once they get more details?
No, Omar. You know, we have Quinnipiac University. They hated it in early June when the net favorable rating was minus 26 points. And look at where we are in late June. It's the same, minus 26 points. The more they learn about this bill, they hate it just as much. I've been going through the historical books and trying to find a piece of
this is a little sus. This is a little sus because people aren't fucking talking about it. No one is fucking talking about it. CNN and MSDNC, they don't even choose to fucking talk about the bill anymore. They just decide to shit on Zohran Mamdani. And the Republicans, they're doing the same thing. They're talking about Zohran Mamdani. They're talking about like a fucking bear that got stuck in a garbage can in Connecticut. They're talking about bullshit that no one gives a fuck about. I'm telling you guys, KFF did this exact kind of research. And I'm not saying that like this is incorrect because it's very much still an unpopular bill. But it is more unpopular when people are educated on what the fuck is going on. There's just no way around it. This is a piece of shit. This is the big booty bill.
Legislation that looks more likely than not to pass, and seeing if there is one as unpopular as the big, beautiful bill. And the bottom line is, Omar, I can't find one. This one is in the history books, and for all of the wrong reasons as far as the American public is concerned.
So why is this bill so unpopular?
Why is this bill so unpopular? Well, I think Republicans would argue that this bill is supposed to help out the American people and their families.
Why do rabbits not like foxes? Why do salmon not like bears? Why do squirrels not like hawks? You guys tell me. Let me know. Because I just cannot comprehend why a defenseless creature would like to be terrorized by a predatory beast. Someone please enlighten me.
But the American people disagree with that idea. All right, Trump's policies and your family, help or hurt? The big, beautiful bill. Just 23% say help. How about 49%? 49% say hurt. Look, that's a 26-point difference in the direction of hurt. Compare that to Trump's first-term agenda, where the plurality said it helped their family at 44% compared to 31% who said hurt. So the American people elected Trump to help them and their families, but they see the big, beautiful bill as one that, on the whole, hurts their families.
All right. Helpful perspective as we work through the individual details of where the Senate negotiations are.
President Donald Trump's sweeping domestic policy bill is inching closer to the finish line. The U.S. Senate adjourned about 3 hours ago after debate on the package of tax cuts and spending priorities. Senators are now bracing for a marathon voting session on amendments, also known as Vote-A-Rama, after they convene at around 9 o'clock in the morning. Several Republicans have raised concerns about the bill's spending levels. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the Senate version of the package would cost far more than the House-approved bill, adding more than $3 trillion to the deficit. Amy Kiley is following the latest developments.
By no means is this bill final.
The fate of President Donald Trump's budget bill remains uncertain ahead of today's Vote-A-Rama in the Senate. Democrats are united in opposition.
A handful of billionaires get a big break, while working people lose their Medicaid.
Oh my God, this guy sucks. He's so bad. Oh, Charles Schumer has like negative charisma. His attribute bars are entirely drained. He is completely emotionless at a time when he literally has it right next to him. $4.45 trillion deficit explosion. I think it would have been more effective if he wrote like 17 million people being kicked off Medicare. 51,000 people are going to fucking die. But he's just like, it's like he's there because he has to be there. I'm just here so I don't get fined type shit. Another transfer of wealth to the billionaires. Like, I understand that that's bad, and I don't agree with that, but this is my issue with the Democrats, is there is a tremendous issue. There is a colossal issue, a colossally shit piece of legislation that's going to ravage this country for the next fucking decade. And they are not stepping up to the moment. They are not reaching the appropriate level of urgency that they need to. This is fucking insane. This is preposterous that Chuck Schumer is the motherfucker who is leading the party at a time when the very foundation of this country, this already cracked foundation of this country, is going to crumble even further. No intensity, no urgency, no charisma. He doesn't meet the moment. Like, this guy is a fucking clown. Like, I don't give a shit if he just came out of the hospital for being dehydrated because he was too busy crying about Zohran Mamdani's victory. Like, get somebody else. Get someone who is fit for the fucking job, because this shit is just, it's insane.
While hungry kids lose access to food funding.
Most Republicans are united in support of the bill.
We have before us today a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver legislation to create a safer, stronger, and more prosperous America.
But if more than 3 Republicans oppose the measure, it's likely to fail. Senator Tom Tillis says he'll vote no and retire at the end of his term.
What do I tell 663,000 people in 2 years or 3 years when President Trump breaks his promise by pushing them off of Medicaid because the funding's not there?
Senator Rand Paul says he voted.
I hate this fucking guy. I hate Tom Tillis. But that is how you appropriately communicate on this subject. He's at least making us believe that he gives a shit about the 650,000 people in North Carolina that are going to lose health care. And newsflash, Chuck Schumer, I don't know if you know this, there's nearly 20 fucking million people that live in New York. More than 1 million of them are going to lose their health care. Meet the moment, dude. This is fucking sad.
No to a procedural measure because he thinks the bill would add trillions to the deficit.
That doesn't sound at all conservative to me.
Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski wants carve-outs.
Rand Paul is... he's more fired up about the debt increasing than Chuck Schumer is about children being hungry, about children starving. That is the current state of both major parties here in the United States. I think that juxtaposition is perfect.
Maine Senator Susan Collins is signaling she'll propose an amendment, and Senator Josh Hawley says he'll vote yes, but
we can't be cutting health care for working people and for poor people in order to constantly give...
Holy fuck, dude. So then vote no on the bill. Like, what the fuck are you doing? He's like, we cannot have this. And he proceeds to allow this fucking thing to happen. Like, these people are so... I hate them. I despise them. Like, looking at them makes me irrationally angry. You, Josh Hawley, had the power to prevent the very thing that you did not want to happen. And you went through with it anyway because you are a fucking corporate shill.
Democrats emphasized the bill would extend 2017 income tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. That's true. And since the cuts are based on percentages, the wealthiest Americans stand to save the most money. And Thomas Gift joins us now from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's the director for the Center on U.S. Politics at the University College London. Thomas, there's been a lot of arm twisting and backroom negotiations and even a last-minute accounting gimmick from the Republicans to try to get this bill through. And all of that, ironically, for a bill that the public largely doesn't want. I mean, this is an unpopular bill. Tell us why.
Well, it's great to be with you, MJ. Thanks so much for having me. You're right. The Republicans in Congress are eager to hand Trump a legislative win with this big, beautiful bill, but they are running into stiff resistance from the public. You know, polls from Pew, from Quinnipiac, the Washington Post, they all show that fewer than 30% of voters support the bill in its current form. And I think that that suggests either a failure by Trump and the GOP to effectively pitch the package, or that voters just don't like what's on offer. And I think that that's more likely. You know, one area where Democrats really have landed their message is on proposed cuts to Medicaid and
Bro, what kind of centrism is this? Like, the Republicans are being intentionally vague about this shit, dude. Do you think they don't know that this is wildly unpopular? No, they very much do, which is even more ghoulish. To act like this is some sort of failure from the Democrats is insane. I understand that, yeah, the Democrats could have done a better job in talking about certain things in this bill, but they've been talking about it. I've seen steady dialogue about it once the details have come out, but the Republicans haven't said dick about it because they know it sucks. They know it's trash. Like, that's the reason this bill is unfavorable, is because it's dog shit. And the Republicans don't talk about it because it's dog shit. You don't have to be a fucking PhD in political science. You don't have to be you don't have to be the director of the Center for United States Studies in London to fucking recognize that.
food assistance. They frame them as draconian, especially for low-income Americans.
They are draconian. That's not the framing.
Republicans have essentially countered by saying this isn't going to affect.
That's the reality. It's not the framing that it's draconian. It is draconian.
Democrats, I think, have won the political argument, at least so far.
And do you see the main rift within the Republican Party right now as being between the fiscal hawks versus the fiscal doves? Or is it more accurate to say, you know, as with so many things in Washington right now, that it's more about getting in line behind President Donald Trump versus standing up to him?
Well, I think it's a combination. You really laid that out well. The big, beautiful bill is revealing a deeper identity crisis within the Republican Party. You know, fiscal conservatives still argue that this bill doesn't go far enough in slashing spending. CBO said it will add $3.3 trillion to federal deficits over the next decade. Senator Rand Paul has warned of blowback if deeper cuts aren't made. And I think that that puts Republicans, and particularly Trump Republicans, in a bind because they spent so much time under the Biden years preaching fiscal restraint, and now they risk looking hypocritical. At the same time, you know, GOP senators are facing backlash over the bill's impact on entitlements. A CBO analysis found that the poorest households could lose around $1,600 a year due to cuts in Medicaid and food stamps. So that's an enormous hit for some voters. And again, many of these voters are Trump voters.
CNN managed to find like the ultimate centrist. How, again, do you teach? What does he teach? Like U.S. studies? How do you not acknowledge the fact that how Republicans vote is in line with what Donald Trump wants? How do you not recognize that? He's been president once already. It happened back then. He's been president for 6 fucking months now. It's still happening. You have MAGA and non-MAGA Republicans in Congress. The MAGA Republicans vote with Trump. The non-MAGA Republicans don't. It's that simple. Again, you don't have to be an esteemed intellectual to figure that out. You just have to have 2 fucking eyes and be able to read the news. You have to be able to understand the domestic affairs.
Talk to you about Thom Tillis. He is, of course, the Republican senator from North Carolina who came out against this bill. That angered President Trump so much that the president threatened to back a primary challenger to Senator Tillis. And then Tillis announced that he's retiring. I mean, if you are a politically vulnerable Republican right now, what lesson do you take away from that?
Well, the lesson is you get in line or you end up not in Washington anymore. Trump is really going to step in as the GOP's closer, I think, in the next 24 hours. And that certainly means pressuring party leaders and rank and file senators with a very clear message, which is either back the bill, we're going to primary you into oblivion. I think the pressure is very similar to what we saw Trump exert during his cabinet picks when he elevated figures like Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel. Some people said this can't be done. Trump comes in, makes some vote calls. All of a sudden, it's a done deal. So Trump isn't in his honeymoon anymore, and his leverage isn't unlimited, but no one else commands the kind of loyalty of the GOP base like he does. So you can definitely be assured that Trump is going all in, making phone calls over the next day.
I entirely disagree with anyone who thinks that a hand-picked candidate by Donald Trump is going to beat a non-MAGA Republican. We have history of this. We have Carrie Lake. We have Doug Mastriano. We have Lee Zeldin. people do not like MAGA Republicans outside of MAGA, and you don't have enough sway to capture the entirety of the party. Tom Tillis, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie is significantly more likely to beat a challenger because they are at least principled. I don't agree with their principles because they are principled conservatives, but they are principled nonetheless. And in this instance, voting against this kind of bill signals to your constituents that regardless of party affiliation, you actually do kind of give a fuck about them. And people remember that when they go to the polls. If Donald Trump threatens to primary you, you should be emboldened by that. You should be emboldened to stand up against this tyrannical freak, not run away and not seek re-election because you're scared of losing. I understand that, Tom Tillis is a little on the older side. I don't know how old he is, but he looks quite old. So he might just be fucking done with politics anyway. But, these younger people like Josh Hawley, Marjorie Taylor Greene, like, as much as I don't fucking like them, I do believe that, well, they don't really count because they are MAGA Republicans, but you know what the fuck I'm saying. As much as I don't like them, if they were non-MAGA Republicans, I would pick them in a congressional race over Trump's pick because his picks are fucking ass. His picks are dog shit. They are turbo dog shit.
And if this bill were to pass, and we're going to watch how things unfold on Capitol Hill in the coming hours, but if it were to pass, how do you think Republicans will contend with and message these steep cuts to Medicaid and food programs that have been quite controversial?
I think it's going to be a real challenge for Republicans as a result. And I think Democrats are certainly going to campaign on some of these cuts in the 2026 midterms. I think Republicans have made a number of 11th hour changes to help win over GOP holdouts and also to try to sort of blunt some of the more negative impacts of this bill. One's a $25 billion relief fund for rural hospitals, increasing the SALT cap to $40,000, the delay of a Medicaid provider tax, addition of SNAP waivers for Alaska and Hawaii, new requirements for wind and solar projects, but that's not going to entirely appease the Republican electorate who don't like this bill.
Yeah, no, this bill is going to tank Republican. It's gonna fucking blow up on them if it passes, especially because by 2026, by these midterms, there will be results from it. People will feel the effects of this bill, and they will remember that when they go to the polls.